All right, let's talk tariffs and coffee, because President Trump's newest round of tariffs could make your morning cup of coffee more expensive. The White House just hit Brazilian goods, for example, including coffee, with a 50% tariff. Brazil is America's top coffee supplier, making up 30% of United States supply.
No one expected the next trade war target to be coffee, not computer chips, not oil. But that warm, familiar cup millions of Americans reach for first thing in the morning. As Washington tightens tariffs on coffee imports from Brazil, America's biggest coffee partner, prices have been climbing fast. And just like that, a daily habit many thought harmless is starting to feel like a hit to the wallet. The Trump administration imposed a 50% tariff on coffee coming from Brazil, which normally supplies about 30 to 34% of America's coffee each year. Since that move, the price of roasted coffee in the U.S. has jumped by 14.5% over the past 12 months, according to reports from stores in New York and other states. In some places, prices have risen as much as 30%, driven by higher import costs and supply shortages. That means if a bag of roasted coffee used to cost $10, it might now be $11.45, a 14.5% jump, or even $13 in areas seeing the 30% hike. For the average household, this could mean spending an extra $15 to $30 a year just to keep making coffee at home. And for small coffee shops, rising ingredient costs are squeezing profit margins, forcing many to consider raising prices or cutting back operations just to stay afloat. The 50% tariff on Brazilian coffee is quickly making its mark at the consumer level. Within just a few weeks, experts in Connecticut say the price of a cup of coffee has gone from $4 to around $4.25. The U.S. imports about 99% of the coffee it consumes, aside from small production in Hawaii and Puerto Rico, which cover only a tiny slice of demand. America simply cannot grow coffee at scale. That means domestic prices are deeply tied to what's happening in the global market. For everyday coffee lovers, this could mean spending hundreds of extra dollars each year, especially if you drink 2 to 3 cups a day. Many folks have already started brewing at home more often to save money. For cafés, especially in places like Connecticut and New York, the challenge is even tougher. Costs are up, but raise prices too fast, and loyal customers might not come back. Some, like Stone Street Cafe, have tried to get ahead of the curve by stocking up early to keep prices steady for now. There's been some confusion about a supposed $1.2 billion coffee deal between Canada and Brazil, but that's not accurate. Right now, the two countries have simply resumed trade talks under the framework of the Mercosur Free Trade Agreement (FTA). There's no specific coffee deal signed. During a recent meeting in Brasilia, Canada's Minister of International Trade and Brazil's Foreign Minister agreed to continue negotiations in October 2025. Canada is looking to diversify its trade and become less reliant on the U.S. In 2024, two-way trade between Canada and Brazil hit $9.1 billion in trade, with Brazil enjoying a surplus of $3.5 billion. Brazil, meanwhile, is actively seeking new partners after the U.S. tariff hike, seeing it as a chance to boost coffee exports to other countries.
And I'm not happy about anything having to do with that war. I settled 7 wars, and actually, if you think about pre-wars, add 3 more, so it would be 10. I thought this would be in the middle of the pack in terms of difficulty. No, I'm not happy about anything about that war. Nothing. Not happy at all. He's removing his tariffs, yeah.
Exactly.
He's removing his retaliatory tariffs, which I thought was nice. And we're going to have another call soon.
Canada has just made a quiet move, but one strong enough to rattle the entire North American supply chain. Overnight, hundreds of U.S. factories lost contracts. Canadian supermarkets are gradually phasing out American products from their shelves. What used to be one of the world's closest trade relationships is now quietly shifting. This is more than just a dip in exports. It's a clear sign. Canada is slowly changing direction, stepping out of America's trade shadow. The real question now is, what does this shift mean for everyday things like prices, jobs, and your household budget? Between May 2024 and May 2025, Canada's export share to the U.S. dropped from 78% to 68%, the lowest level in years. This isn't happening by accident. It's a deliberate move as trade tensions between the two countries have grown. Canada is pushing to diversify, with more goods now heading to the UK, the EU, Australia, Indonesia, and Japan. Gold exports to the UK have gone up especially fast. But overall, those gains haven't yet made up for the 7.7 billion Canadian dollar drop in trade with the US. In April 2025 alone, Canada's trade surplus with the United States shrank to just 3.6 billion Canadian dollars, the lowest since late 2020, after exports dropped by 15.7%. Even though sales to other countries rose slightly. What does this mean for shoppers? Well, you might start noticing it on the price tags. A box of cookies that used to cost $4 Canadian and 50 cents from an American supplier might now cost $5.20 if it's sourced from farther away. You'll likely see more items from Australia, Japan, or Europe filling up store shelves. For workers in industries that rely on US partners, this shift could mean changes to contracts, fewer orders, or even smaller paychecks in the near future. To help companies cope with the ripple effects of new tariffs and trade changes, the Canadian government has rolled out a support package worth over 6.5 billion Canadian dollars. Of that, 5 billion is set aside to help boost exports to new markets. Another 1 billion goes to the agri-food sector, and 500 million will be available as low-interest loans to help businesses keep running and protect jobs. Ontario has added its own 11 billion Canadian dollars package, offering tax breaks and rebates to ease the pressure on business owners and help them avoid job cuts. What does this mean for the average Canadian? It means prices may not climb as fast as they could have. For example, if a can of bread used to cost 3 Canadian dollars, instead of jumping to 3.50 due to rising costs, it might stay the same because the company got a bit of help. Farmers and food producers also benefit from more stable demand and less uncertainty in global markets. It's one way the government is trying to keep major waves from crashing directly into your grocery bills or dinner table. Even as Canada spreads its trade around, the US remains a giant in the picture. In 2024, about 76% of Canada's total exports still went south of the border, and total trade between the two countries topped 1 trillion Canadian dollars for the third year in a row. Still, between May and June 2025, that number started to slip. Exports to the US made up just 70% of Canada's total in June, down from about 83% in the same month a year earlier. The trend is clear. Change is happening, even if slowly, but it's not as simple as walking away. In key areas like energy, Canada is still deeply tied to the US. Just look at Alberta. About 90% of its crude oil exports still head to American refineries. Even as opportunities are starting to open up in Asian markets, experts say the long-standing trade setup between the two economies means a full break is nearly impossible, even if Canada is trying to slowly reduce its dependence.
For decades, coffee imports entered the United States largely duty-free, but now some of America's top trading partners are facing double-digit tariffs on their imports, including coffee. It's straining an industry that provides more than 1 million jobs in the US, and it's poised to strain prices too.
Something big just happened, and you'll probably feel it most clearly each morning. Right there in your hand, your usual cup of coffee. A new tariff from the White House, a strong reaction from Brazil, and a global coffee market thrown into turmoil. The result? Prices are jumping, supermarkets are scrambling, cafés are raising their eyebrows, and the everyday consumers, are left holding the bill. But this is not just about pricier coffee. It's a clear sign that pressure on prices, supply chains, and daily spending is spreading fast from offices in Washington to store shelves across the country. Still think your morning coffee is just a habit. It is not that simple anymore. The Trump administration has just slapped a 50% tariff on coffee imports from Brazil, a country that supplies about 35 to 40% of the coffee Americans drink. And right after the news broke, global Arabica coffee prices shot up, hitting $4.30 per pound in early 2025, twice as high as the same time last year. In the US, the price of roasted coffee exports has already jumped 11.8%, and instant coffee has gone up 12.4%. From May 2024 to May 2025, according to forecasts from the Wall Street Journal, This new tariff could push retail coffee prices up by 15 to 20% in the near future. What does that mean for your wallet? A bag of coffee that used to cost $12 might soon cost $13.20 to $14.40 in just a few weeks. Small cafés are also feeling the pressure and may need to raise their prices or cut back on discounts. That familiar cup of morning coffee, it might just start making your wallet feel a little lighter. The International Coffee Organization, ICO, reports that global coffee prices actually dropped 11.8% in July 2025, down to 259.31 US cents per pound. That's lower than the month before, but still higher than July 2024. Yet, coffee prices in the US are still climbing. The June 2025 CPI shows that coffee prices in supermarkets rose 2.2%, helping push overall food prices up by 0.3%. Even though input costs are dropping, taxes, shipping, and high interest rates keep final prices high. For everyday shoppers, the difference is showing up in receipts. That same $12 bag of coffee might now ring up at $12.25 or $12.30. It may not sound like much, but if you drink coffee daily, those extra cents add up quickly. The US retail scene is feeling the heat from all sides. Tariffs, rising goods costs, expensive logistics, and high interest rates. Chains like Food Line and Stop & Shop, part of Ahold Delhaize, are pushing back against price hikes from big-name brands like Nivea and Heineken, trying to shield shoppers from sticker shock. In the middle of all this, the new US tariffs are expected to keep pushing coffee prices even higher, adding more weight to Americans already juggling rising living costs. Next time you go to the store, look closely. You might notice more store-brand items taking up space, while some well-known brands quietly disappear. A bag of laundry detergent might still be priced reasonably thanks to retailer strategies. But that cup of morning coffee, it could cost you an extra 50 cents to $1, a small increase. Yes, but enough to make some people rethink their daily habits.
Now, according to the U.S. Travel Association, even a 10% drop in Canadian tourists could cost the U.S. more than $2 billion in spending and threaten 140,000 jobs.
You walk into an airport that once buzzed with crowds and excitement. Now, you find rows of empty seats, silent hallways, and closed check-in counters. Sounds dramatic. This is the new reality at America's busiest airports, as airlines and travelers quietly turn away from the United States. There was a time when America's biggest airports bustled, tourists rushing, constant boarding calls, but since early 2025, over 10 major airlines, including Singapore Airlines, Lufthansa, Emirates, Air France, Play Airlines have quietly cut flights to the U.S. without major announcements. Now, silence lingers at O'Hare, LAX, and JFK, emptier waiting areas, fewer staff at check-in, and departure boards crowded with canceled routes. In cities like Chicago and New York, the numbers start to feel real. With 85,000 jobs at risk, families are rethinking how to pay the mortgage, keep up with college savings, or cover medical expenses for aging parents. This isn't just about a drop in tourism. It's a wave shaking the foundations of daily life, sometimes leaving the dinner table quieter, and plans for the future more uncertain. With job losses and shrinking incomes, an average family may have to cut $100 from the monthly grocery budget, often buying less fresh meat, milk, or produce. Multiply that by 85,000 workers. And local retailers and food suppliers feel the ripple, making entire cities more cautious. Higher landing fees, complicated visa procedures, and frosty welcomes at border checkpoints have made even the dream of coming to America less certain. These days, even a pricey business class ticket doesn't guarantee easy entry. Every shift cut, every lost dollar, weighs heavier when there are bills to pay and kids asking for new shoes. With fewer hotel guests, staff see their hours cut sometimes by as much as 6 hours per week. That's $240 a month, money that once covered groceries, summer camps, or a weekend meal to unwind from the stress. If this continues, hotel and restaurant workers may need to tighten their budgets even further. Shopping for fresh meat, fish, and vegetables might shrink by up to 20%. That's $50 to $100 less per month for every family working in these industries. Not long ago, travelers from Scandinavia, Korea, the UK, and France would visit America touring colleges, attending conferences, or seeking a new kind of summer. Now, they're picking Canada or Japan, which seem more open and welcoming. With everyday essentials, sales expected to drop by $60 million this year. Shop owners face tough choices: cut staff hours, reduce orders, or explain slimmer margins to employees. Shelves aren't empty, but aisles often are, making it hard to plan or invest. As international visitors vanish, local milk sales could drop 15 to 20% from last year. Store owners may lose $1,000 to $2,000 in monthly revenue, affecting fresh product quality and supply, and possibly raising prices if supply chains struggle. In past years, city lights in places like New York or Miami burned bright, thanks to international visitors renting short-term apartments, packing coffee shops, bringing energy to every corner. Now, as British Airways, Lufthansa, and Jetstar all reduce flights, 1.5 million visits simply vanish. Short-term apartment rents in former gateways to America are dropping by an average of $200 per month. For tenants, it sounds like a win. But for landlords who relied on that income to pay debt or cover medical bills, it's nearly $50 million in lost revenue. Quietly, faith in the American dream slips a little more, not just in the eyes of the world, but even for those who once thought they'd finally found stability.
We don't make a lot of money. Now, I can't absorb, if all of a sudden there's a 50% tariff on something, or even a 25%, I can't absorb all of that as a family business.
If you think potatoes are only a farmer's concern, you might want to think again. In Canada, golden potato fields are shrinking. Contracts are being torn up, and cold storage facilities are filling with unsold seed potatoes. Meanwhile, in the United States, the price of potatoes and potato-based foods is quietly creeping upward. This is no small matter. Behind it lies an undercurrent from Canada, where truckloads of potatoes heading south to the US have fallen sharply, triggering changes that could reach right into our own kitchens. According to the latest figures, Canada's fresh potato exports to the United States have plunged by about 19%, largely due to import tariffs and shifts in trade policy. In contrast, exports of frozen potato products, especially frozen potatoes, have risen modestly by around 10%. In 2025, U.S. retail food prices are projected to rise nearly 3%, with the food-at-home category alone increasing by more than 2%. This means a 5-pound bag of potatoes, a little over 2 kilograms, that once cost American shoppers $3.50 could soon reach $3.80 to $4. For processed potato products like frozen French fries, prices may rise by several dozen cents per pack. That might seem small, but over the course of a year, it can add up to a noticeable expense for households. To reduce dependence on the U.S. market, Canada has signed a $1.6 billion Canadian dollars agreement with Asian partners. This is a significant move, as Canada is a member of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership (CPTPP). The pact allows Canadian processed potato exports to markets such as Japan, South Korea, and Indonesia without import tariffs. Still, the U.S. remains Canada's largest buyer. In 2021 to 2022, the U.S. accounted for 89% of Canada's French fry exports, roughly $1.7 billion US dollars, out of the total $1.9 billion US dollars. This underscores that expanding into Asian markets will take time, but it is an essential strategy to mitigate risks when the U.S. market fluctuates. On April 11, many Canadian processing plants cut contracts with farmers. In Manitoba, potato acreage has dropped by 10 to 20%. For a farmer cultivating 20 hectares, this reduction could mean losing tens of tons of potatoes and tens of thousands of dollars in income. Some contracts have even been canceled outright, leaving farmers with thousands of bags of seed potatoes in storage, or forcing them to sell off the crop for animal feed at much lower prices. The impact is not limited to growers. Jobs in transportation, packaging, and cold storage are also being cut. In Alberta, the picture is somewhat brighter. Large plants, such as the Coaldale facility, are investing in new value-added processing lines. If successful, this could create stable jobs for hundreds of local workers, from machine technicians to packaging staff. But that's a story for the near future. For now, many farm families are already tightening their budgets, knowing this year's harvest will be leaner.
Anybody in the supply chain hears about duties and tariffs or any other fees, they get very anxious about those fees being imposed.
We know here in Canada over the last number of weeks and months that Donald Trump is doing everything in his power to destroy our economy.
Picture this. You decide to fix up your kitchen, nothing major, just new wooden floors and a few cabinets. The contractor shows up, measures everything, nods in approval. But when you ask for a quote, he sighs and says, last week, probably around $5,000. This week, closer to $6,000. Wood prices are jumping every day. Sounds ridiculous. Not really. Somewhere far from your control. A new tax policy just got signed. A strong tweet was sent. A quick nod happened in Washington. And suddenly, supply chains start to shake. According to a March 2025 survey by the NAHB, new import tariffs have added an average of $9,200 to the cost of building a single home. The NAHB, or Wells Fargo Housing Market Index, has also dropped to 39, the lowest in 7 months. Investopedia reports that tariffs on building materials could hit as high as 34.5%, adding anywhere from $7,500 to $10,000 to the cost of constructing a single-family house. What does this mean for everyday folks? A house that was expected to cost $300,000 might now cost $309,200. Kitchen cabinets, doors, hardwood flooring, they all go up. A $5,000 kitchen set might now cost $5,500. Even if you are not building a house, rising material costs push up rental prices and home renovation expenses. That goal of finding a stable place to live, it just got a bit farther away. In February 2025, the NAHB, or Wells Fargo Index, dropped to 42, its lowest point in 5 months, due to worries about tariffs and mortgage rates hovering near 7%. By March, the index dipped even lower, to 39, the lowest in 7 months. At the same time, 71% of homebuilders reported that spring 2025 has been their slowest season since 2019. Why? Higher material costs and cautious buyers hesitating over steep prices and rising interest rates. This makes building or fixing a home harder to plan. Let's say you had a $20,000 budget to add a second floor. Now, you might be looking at $21,500 or even $22,000. If you are in the market to buy, the slowdown means fewer builders taking on projects, and material prices keep going up regardless. The U.S. plans to raise tariffs on softwood lumber from Canada from 14.5% to nearly 40%, including anti-subsidy taxes and a proposed 25% increase under the Trump administration. In response, Canada announced a support package for its lumber sector worth $1.2 billion Canadian dollars, around $870 million US dollars, including $700 million Canadian dollars in low-interest loans and $500 million Canadian dollars for product development and market expansion. Right away, U.S. lumber futures jumped to $695 per 1,000 board feet, the highest in 3 years, and up 39% from the same time last year, even though home building demand is cooling. This translates to much higher wood-related costs. A framing set that used to cost $500 could now be $700. Home construction, renovations, even furniture builds are seeing big cost hikes. Many families are delaying plans or settling for cheaper materials they do not really like. And even with Canada's financial help for the industry, lumber prices show no sign of dropping. American consumers are the first to feel the squeeze.
Prime Minister also making news back on Friday, saying that Canada will be dropping many of our retaliatory tariffs. In September, Canada is going to remove tariffs on U.S. goods that comply with the North American Free Trade Agreement.
I think that he's following what Mexico did. They never put retaliatory tariffs on U.S. Goods, and it didn't really hurt or make anything better. It didn't make them stronger when it came to having those trade negotiations.
No one really saw this coming, not in Washington, not on Wall Street, and certainly not inside boardrooms of household names like Walmart, GM, or Cargill, but quietly and without making much noise. Canada has shifted gears. The country is now focusing trade efforts on 11 new partners, moving away from some long-standing relationships, including many big-name American companies that once felt untouchable. From supermarkets to car dealerships, from crude oil to wheat, from software to heavy machinery, a slow but steady wave of change is moving through. And if you think this has nothing to do with you, it might be worth taking another look at your latest grocery bill or rental costs for construction equipment. In the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2025, Walmart Canada brought in $6.3 billion in net sales, a 5.5% jump from the same time last year. Online sales rose sharply, up 30%, thanks to expanded home delivery and pickup services. Looking globally, Walmart reached $681 billion in revenue for the 2025 fiscal year, keeping its position strong worldwide. In the auto sector, GM Canada led the market in early 2025 with a 15.8% market share. In the second quarter alone, they sold 83,666 vehicles, an 8% increase from the year before. The real standout, though, is electric vehicles, EVs. GM's EV share tripled, reaching 23.2% in Q2 and making up 15.8% of all cars sold in Canada this year. What does that mean for folks on the ground? Basically, more choices and better prices. If an electric car used to cost you 45,000 Canadian dollars, you might now find a solid option for around 42 to 43,000. That's easier on the wallet and more accessible for families looking to go electric. Meanwhile, over at the grocery store, better logistics and rising sales are helping to keep staple prices stable. Things like milk, bread, and toilet paper are holding their ground. In the first quarter of 2025, Imperial Oil, a joint venture between ExxonMobil and Canada, reported revenue of $12.28 billion Canadian dollars, marking a 1.3% increase compared to the same period last year, with net income reaching $1.2 billion Canadian dollars. It's clear the company is staying steady in the midst of a tough and constantly shifting energy sector. As for agriculture, U.S. giant Cargill still accounts for around 25% of American grain exports. While there's no exact number on recent shipments to Canada, the shift in Canada's sourcing strategy could start affecting demand for U.S. products. Overall, U.S. agricultural exports reached $191 billion in 2024, with nearly 48% of that heading to Canada. But with Canada broadening its supplier base, American firms may face tougher competition to hold their ground. For shoppers, this could mean slight changes in pricing. That bottle of cooking oil that used to cost $4.50 might now go for around $4.60. At the same time, you'll likely notice more locally grown Canadian produce at your neighborhood store, helping to balance prices and support homegrown businesses. Microsoft Canada is holding strong, bringing in over $1 billion Canadian dollars in revenue and adding roughly $6.6 billion Canadian dollars to the national GDP. The tech boom is also opening up jobs and making everyday digital services smoother and more affordable. JP Morgan, while not disclosing exact numbers, still employs over 600 staff across 5 major business areas in Canada. This shows that financial services remain steady and supportive, especially for things like loans and credit card services.